In the heart of Istanbul, on a blood-soaked morning in June 1826, the most elite military force in history committed the ultimate crime against their own master. For centuries, they had been the shadow rulers of an empire that spanned 3 continents. They had made and unmade sultans at will, and they had tasted the blood of kings. But on this day, the hunters would become the hunted. The predators would become the prey. And in the end, thousands would die in what history would euphemistically call the Auspicious Incident. Welcome back to Crimes the Crown. I'm your host, Chris, and this is the story of the Janissaries, an army unlike any other in history. Christian boys stolen from their families, converted to Islam, and forged into the ultimate killing machine for the Ottoman Empire. Over 4 centuries, these elite soldiers conquered Europe, crushed the Byzantine Empire, and struck fear into the hearts of kings from Vienna to Cairo. They were celibate, they were disciplined, and they were absolutely loyal until they weren't. By the 19th century, these once perfect warriors had become something else entirely. A corrupt, power-hungry mafia that held the Ottoman Empire hostage. They had assassinated sultans, overthrown governments, and turned the palace into their own personal playground. But Sultan Mahmud II had a plan. A final solution, and it would end with the streets of Istanbul running red with the blood of the empire's own protectors. To understand this ultimate betrayal, we must go back to the very beginning. The year was 1383, and the Ottoman Empire had a problem, you see. How do you create soldiers who are absolutely loyal to the Sultan, with no divided loyalties to family, tribe, or homeland? The answer was as brilliant as it was horrifying. The devshirme, or child levy. Every few years, Ottoman officials would sweep through Christian villages in the Balkans, selecting the brightest, strongest boys between 8 and 18 years old. These children were then torn from their families, force-marched to Constantinople, converted to Islam, and subjugated to years of brutal military training. They learned to fight with scimitar and musket, but more importantly, they learned that the Sultan was their very father, their god, their everything. They became the Janissaries, literally meaning new soldiers, but history would know them as the Janissaries. And for centuries, the system worked perfectly. The Janissaries were unstoppable, you see. In 1453, they smashed through the walls of Constantinople, ending the 1,000-year Byzantine Empire in a single day. They conquered Belgrade, Budapest, and stood at the gates of Vienna twice. You see, but their true power wasn't just on the battlefield, it was in the palace. Unlike other armies, the Janissaries lived in the capital. They knew every secret, every weakness, every conspiracy. They became the ultimate kingmakers. And here's where the brilliant system began to crack. Because when you create soldiers who have no loyalty except to power itself, what happens when those same soldiers realize they are the power? By the 17th century, the Janissaries had discovered something intoxicating: extortion. Why serve the Sultan when you could control him? Their method was as simple as it was effective. When they wanted something, higher pay, a new war, even a new sultan, they would overturn their soup cauldrons in the courtyard and begin the ancient ritual of revolt. And it worked again and again and again. Sultans who refused to pay found themselves deposed, exiled, or worse. In 1622, they strangled Sultan Osman II with the bowstring. In 1703, they forced Sultan Mustafa II to abdicate. And by 1730, they were making and unmaking rulers like chess pieces. The cancer had spread. The Janissaries were no longer just soldiers. They were a criminal organization in military uniform, holding an empire of 25 million people hostage to their greed. Enter Sultan Mahmud II. When he took the throne in 1808, he inherited an empire in free fall. The Janissaries had grown fat and lazy, more interested in their Istanbul coffee houses than fighting wars. They refused to modernize, refused to use new weapons, and most importantly, refused to stop bleeding the treasury dry. You see, while the Janissaries grew rich, the empire itself was crumbling. Greece was in revolt, Serbia had broken free and Egypt was practically independent, and European armies with modern tactics and weapons were winning battle after battle after battle against the once invincible Ottomans. Mahmud knew the truth that no sultan before him had dared to face. The Janissaries weren't protecting the empire anymore. They were the ones killing it. But how do you destroy an army of 135,000 men who live in your own capital and have been murdering sultans for 2 centuries? You don't fight them, you trap them. For months, Mahmud II had been preparing. While the Janissaries drank coffee and counted their bribes, the Sultan was secretly training a new army, loyal soldiers equipped with modern weapons and European tactics. On June 14, 1826, Mahmud announced his master stroke: military reforms, new uniforms, new training, and new discipline. It sounded innocent enough at surface, but the Janissaries knew better. This was an attempt to clip their wings. The response was immediate and predictable. The soup cauldrons were overturned. The ancient ritual of revolt began. Thousands of Janissaries poured into the Hippodrome, the same square where chariot races had thrilled Byzantine crowds 1,000 years before. They came in their distinctive white caps, carrying their traditional weapons, confident in their power. After all, they had done this dozens of times before. Every sultan eventually would bend the knee, but this time was different. This time, they had walked into a killing ground. At dawn on June 15th, Sultan Mahmud II made his move. While the Janissaries were trapped in the Hippodrome, his loyal troops surrounded the square. Modern cannons were wheeled into position, and the exits were sealed. The Sultan's Grand Vizier read the decree. The Janissary corps was dissolved. They were ordered to surrender immediately. The Janissaries' response was swift and violent. They drew their weapons and charged, but scimitars and old muskets were no match for modern artillery. The first cannon volley tore through their ranks like a scythe through wheat. Then came the second, and the third. What followed wasn't a battle, it was an execution. For hours, the cannons roared. The air filled with smoke and screams. The cobblestones ran red with blood. By sunset, 4,000 Janissaries lay dead in the square. Another 6,000 were executed in the following days. The survivors were forced into exile or forced into hiding. The empire that had been held hostage for 2 centuries was finally free. In the aftermath of what Sultan Mahmud II cynically called the Auspicious Incident, the true scope of Janissary corruption was revealed. Palace investigations uncovered decades of embezzlement, bribery, and murder. The Janissaries had been stealing not just from the treasury, but from the very soldiers they commanded. They had sold military secrets to enemies, allowed fortresses to fall in exchange for gold, and even assassinated their own officers who tried to restore discipline. But perhaps the most shocking discovery was this: many of the Janissaries weren't even soldiers anymore. They had been selling their positions to merchants, craftsmen, and criminals who wanted the prestige and privileges without the military service. The army that had once conquered Europe had become a criminal enterprise masquerading as a military force, and their elimination wasn't just justice, it was surgery, cutting out a cancer that had been killing the empire from within. But was it too late? The Janissaries were gone, but the empire they had helped destroy continued to crumble. Greece achieved independence in 1832. The Crimean War exposed Ottoman military weakness, and by 1918, the empire that had once threatened Vienna was history. The truth is complicated. The Janissaries had been both the empire's greatest strength and its fatal weakness. Their destruction was necessary, but it came many centuries too late. And perhaps the real crime here? Not just what the Janissaries did, but what they prevented the empire from becoming. How many innovations were stifled? How many reforms blocked? How many capable leaders eliminated because they threatened Janissary privilege? Today, tourists walk through Istanbul's Hippodrome, now called Sultan Mehmet Square, probably unaware that they're treading on one of history's greatest crime scenes. The cobblestones have been replaced, the blood has long since washed away, but the lessons remain. The Janissaries began as the perfect solution to an impossible problem: how to create absolute loyalty. But absolute power, as Lord Acton would later observe, corrupts absolutely. The system designed to serve the Sultan ultimately enslaved him. Their story is a reminder that even the most brilliant institutions can become the very thing they were created to prevent. The guardians became the threat, the protectors became the predators, and in the end they devoured not just their sultan but themselves. But here's the question that haunts historians. Was there another way? Could the Janissaries have been reformed instead of destroyed? Did Sultan Mahmud II have any choice but mass murder? What do you think? Was the Auspicious Incident justice or genocide? Could the Ottoman Empire have survived without destroying its most famous military force? And what does this tell us about the price of absolute power? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you found this dive into one of history's most shocking betrayals fascinating, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to Crimes of the Crown, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next investigation into the dark secrets of royal history. Next time, we'll explore another tale of power, corruption, and ultimate justice. Until then, remember, in the Game of Thrones, even the kingmakers can become the kingslayers.